We're talking about documentary filmmaking, which is a topic that I've been wanting to cover for quite a bit, and I just released a brand new documentary that I shot over 4 years ago, and it was just sitting on a hard drive, so I decided to kind of retake a look at it and finally publish it. I've been very excited about that, very excited about all the feedback and love that you guys have been showing it so far. I definitely recommend you guys check that out to kind of see some of the things that I'll be talking about in this video applied. And of course, this is just my take on documentary filmmaking. These are the things that I learned throughout that process and some of the valuable information that I saw that could work for not just my project, but your projects as well, potentially. All right, so with all that being said, as you can see, I'm very excited for this topic. I can't wait to explore this along with you. So let's jump into it and let's talk documentaries. So, documentaries. Now, this niche or genre of filmmaking can be very, very challenging, but it can also be a lot easier than most narrative type of shoots. And that is because a lot of times as filmmakers that are just up and coming, that are just trying to get their project made, it can be very challenging to pull together actors and different locations and logistics and budget and props. So that's where documentaries kind of take that part away from you because it's all real, it's all there. Your job is just to capture that. So you don't have to find actors, you have to find real people that have something to say. It's just what comes with the story. And that is what makes documentaries challenging. Because although you have all these sort of logistical problems already sort of figured out, the story is something that is a lot more challenging in a lot of cases when it comes to documentaries. And that is because you're not making something up. There are real lives involved. There's real stories that could potentially have a real impact. That approach already just calls for a certain way of being delicate with it and treating it in a way that merits respect to the story that you're trying to cover, and that is also engaging. Because it's very easy to script some things to make them exciting and really plan out certain beats when it is scripted. But when it comes to documentary, sometimes it's completely raw, sometimes it's a mixture of scripted and non-scripted, and it's really harder to kind of shape a story out of certain events, out of certain words being spoken, and kind of mashing them up together in a way that makes sense for the overall story that you're trying to tell. But before diving into all those specifics and getting overwhelmed with that, start with something that you really care about. Because if you really start with something that you are genuinely interested in, something that you just feel an urge to say or to expose, then everything else kind of becomes a little bit easier because it is something that is true to you. And usually when that happens, there's a certain connection and there's a certain flow that sort of takes away a lot of the writing blocks, a lot of the obstacles that you might find if you are engaging yourself in a topic that you're not really interested in. So that's probably the most important starting point in any documentary. You need to make sure that you are choosing something that's close to your heart, close to your roots, or something that you're really getting into and that you think other people should know about. Once you have that drive behind you, everything else will sort of fall into place if the topic is right. Documentaries can really expose us to certain realities, or it can even expose ourselves to ourselves. We can learn new things just by hearing different stories. And one of the things that I care most about filmmaking is perspectives. When you can give other people perspectives through storytelling, it creates empathy. It's probably one of the most important ways of humans from all around the world to be able to connect with each other, to be able to get an understanding of each other. A lot of the problems that occur in society a lot of times come from insecurities that are often tied to fear. And fear can be triggered by just simply not knowing. And I mean, we've had plenty of examples of this. So I think it's really important to understand that because there is really true power in that. And you're yielding it as a filmmaker, as sort of the conductor of the story that you'll be shaping in your own documentary. And that's not to be taken for granted. I think that documentaries have a real important weight and can really create some significant ripples in our society, in the way we perceive things. Hopefully I'm not getting too deep and getting too ahead of myself, but I think that's a really important core understanding of what kind of genre you're getting into if you're choosing to make a documentary. So, step 2, once you have your story, once you have your interest and you're laser focused on it, You need to learn as much as possible on that topic, on that person, whatever you're trying to bring to life with your camera, through your story. You need to really become familiar with it. You need to learn as much as possible and get as many perspectives on the topic as you can. On a certain topic, the more perspectives, the more voices are heard, the better, because then it's up to the viewer to kind of deconstruct what they're hearing and seeing and form their own opinion. You know, because you're dealing with real people and other real people watching it, it's very easy to lose your audience when you're trying to really forcefully construe a certain image or a certain side of a topic. Whereas maybe leaving it more open can even start a conversation with your audience and can be a lot more profound that way. Of course, this is all very vague. I'm just saying these are things that you can keep in mind depending on the topic, and if this rings true to you and if this makes sense, then good. So research doesn't only have to do with just the writing aspect. It can also be footage. Maybe some older footage that you need to collect, or, you know, especially if you're dealing with something historical or with real events or with someone's past life, it can be really helpful to sort of ground that story by using real stock footage or footage from that certain event. So once you have a really good idea of what you're trying to tackle, the next thing is, well, what is the next thing? You can't really write a script, right? Because, you know, you're gonna be interviewing people, you're not gonna really know what's gonna come out of their mouth or where they might lead your story. There's a certain level of control that you have to let go and sort of embrace the chaos of this process and sort of shape enough of it beforehand so that you're prepared, but leave enough room so that it can take its own form and it can take its own life. And then it becomes more of a matter of just capturing it and shaping it to make it cohesive with you know, your starting goals and what you had in mind. So that's where I recommend just making an outline, making mood books, making, you know, like just sort of create a mental image of how this is gonna feel, of how the general arcs and direction of your story should be. And make that as a loose guide. You know, you can have certain events, maybe certain characters speak at certain times. But what I found out is that a lot of times you can have a very rough outline, but all of that can change. So the real important step of creating an outline a lot of times happens in post. When you have all this material, you have all these sort of puzzle pieces, and it's a matter of kind of fitting them in a way that can again form that linear line of your story, and it can all make sense and fit well together. And again, I wish I could be more specific, but of course, when we're talking about documentaries, literally every piece is different from each other. But from what I've found personally is that it is almost impossible to have specific beats and specific story points happen, because I think if that were to work, and sometimes it can and it's great, but a lot of times it might be that you're forcing things in a little bit too much. Of course, that depends on the topic that you're doing, but I found that there is sort of a mental compromise that you have to have with yourself going into this, knowing that you have to kind of keep things in control and guide the overall direction, while, you know, still having the freedom of whoever is part of the story to express themselves and to, you know, kind of go along with that and not try to limit them or restrict them too much. Even in moments where I thought the story was kind of derailing, and then he shared one little golden nugget that was just a really powerful quote or a really powerful moment or a personal story that, you know, I had no idea was coming. This happened in this latest documentary that I posted, Sir Opifex. We are essentially interviewing a lot of people that were tied in some way to the world of antique cars, whether it's through racing, restoration, the mechanical components, even the tapestry. There's all of this great craftsmanship and these artisans that unfortunately are kind of disappearing in our society. That's what the story's about. We were interviewing this pilot, and his story had nothing to do about that. It was about, it almost felt like a personal grief, a personal story that was weighing him down and that he just needed to express. When something like that happens, you make it work. You know, you let him go, you let him express what he needs. And a lot of times it's those moments that find their way into your documentary that become the best fit for what you're trying to say. And although it wasn't specifically to the topic, a lot of the things that he was saying, a lot of the messages that he was trying to communicate with his personal story really tied in with the themes and was sort of acting as a metaphor for everything else that was happening in the documentary. Explore all avenues, be really curious about who's in front of the lens, about what topic you're tackling. It's always important that while you're shooting, you're letting things breathe, you're letting things kind of flow on their own, so that then later you can almost act more of a curator instead of, not having enough material. We're actually going to be talking about shooting, everything that I learned and some of the things that I had to do with no gear shooting in Italy for this documentary. I'm going to share a few things that I think are pretty valuable, but I'll do that in the next video where we're just going to be focusing on that. Hopefully this one just kind of gave you a general sense of what kind of headspace to be in, what things to look for, what pieces you want to start gathering before you actually throw yourself into the shooting of a documentary. Also, I know it's been a little bit slow on the contents just because I'm trying to work some things out so that this can become a lot more sustainable. More on that soon. I do want to say that in the meantime, I've been also putting content on an app called Fireworks. And I've just been sharing some random VFX shots that I did. And I'm also gonna have quick tips on every Tuesday, so 30-second quick tips, something that you can learn very quickly. And also follow me on Instagram to keep up with just random shenanigans and things that just are beyond these type of videos. We're in this abandoned house, and I think we might have stumbled upon a murder scene. All right guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Chris Trini for Kriscoart, and I'll see you next time.